Halton. Thank you so much for joining us today on Healthy Minds, Healthy Lives. I'm your host, Nadirah Nazir. Today's topic is extremely important because nowadays the average age for male and female is mid-80s. Do we have enough savings to live a comfortable life? And oftentimes people are very stressed out from a mental health and physical illness because they feel that they don't have enough money to live a comfortable life. I just want to kind of get some statistic to you guys. In the recent polling, CIBC found that 32% of Canadians aged between 45 and 64 has no retirement savings. And 53% of them are unsure if they will have enough for their retirement. And a similar poll was conducted by RBC, mentioning that 39% of respondents were concerned about outliving their savings. And we have an expert today. His name is John Webster, my guest, who's going to be talking about what can you do when you are in your 20s, 30s, even 40s, 50s to ensure you have enough money to retire well, so that will provide you peace of mind. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Nadirah. Thanks for inviting me today.
John, give us a little bit of your background when it comes to financials.
I've been in the investment industry for 31 years now. I have a commerce degree in accounting and finance, as well as a master's of law degree in securities law. I'm the president at Queensbury Securities. We're an independent investment firm with advisors in Ontario, Alberta, and British Columbia, servicing the financial needs of Canadians.
So let's talk a little bit. So let's start with the young ones, right? And then we'll get to the harder questions when you're older and you don't have enough money. So if you're starting out, what's the age that somebody should start thinking about their retirement?
And from a financial standpoint, the sooner the better. And it should be obvious, but the sooner that you can start saving for your retirement, the easier it's going to be down the road. It's tough when you're starting out because every dollar counts, and you need that money for your rent, and you need your first vehicle. There's lots of things that you want to spend money on when you're young. So it can be very difficult sometimes for people to say, oh, maybe I should take 10% of my first paycheck and set it aside for retirement. Let's face it, there's going to be a whole lot of things that are going to happen from the time that you start your first job up until the point when you buy your first house or get yourself established a bit more in life. You're going to get married, you're going to have kids, there's going to be all kinds of things happen. So very difficult to get in that mindset early on of saving. Having said that, it's a great habit to get into, right? It's easy. The old adage, set aside 10% of your savings. And maybe it doesn't end up being for your retirement. Maybe it ends up going towards that house purchase later on when you're ready for it. But it's a great habit to get into early. Not everybody can do it. And for those that can't do it, it shifts. Rather than saving 10% from the start, you start off saving nothing or maybe 5% or a little bit. And then maybe when you're 35, you push it up towards that 10%. And then when you find that when you get up to 50 years old, maybe now it's got to be 20% of your earnings goes into savings. I think it helps if you think of savings as deferred consumption. That's all it is. You can consume what you have now, or you can consume it later. And it's an individual choice. Some people want to consume what they have now. Worry about later when it comes.
And that's such a mindset that will provide them probably a lot of stress in the future, because at the end of the day, you want to make sure you have a comfortable life. So for folks who are starting out in their 20s, to your point, maybe the rule of thumb is try to save 10% and invest it wisely so that you can have that compounded interest. Did you know that 49% of Canadians are $200 away from insolvency? Most folks are living paycheck to paycheck. What is your advice for those folks that are already having a challenge making ends meet right now?
It really does come down to budgeting. I mean, we all have money in that we all have an income coming in. And it's what we do with that income that counts. And you know, when you're going out looking for a place to rent, assuming you haven't bought a place yet, you're looking for a place to rent. People will tell you, oh, you can budget 35 to 40% of your income to go towards accommodation. Yes, you can afford to live at that level, but that doesn't leave anything for your savings. So look at it and say, you know what if I peel back on that? What if I go at 30% or possibly less? And it means living in a place that's not as nice as you could afford today. But it means that you're going to have that savings to build up. So it is a personal choice. Do you want to consume it today, or do you want to save for later? And you know, if you consume it today, it means you're going to have nicer things today. It means you're going to have a nicer place to live. It means you're going to be able to go out for more meals. You know, it means maybe you can have a nicer car. So do you want that immediate gratification of spending your money now, knowing that you might not have anything squirreled away for later, and that's a risk that you're going to face? But go into it consciously. Understand the consequences of your decision today. That, you know what, if we're going to go out for meals all the time, I work in downtown Toronto, and buying lunch downtown is terribly expensive. And especially since coming back from the pandemic, we all know the prices have gone up everywhere. And it's a struggle to find a lunch downtown Toronto for under $10. That's a lot. If you're into work 5 days a week and 250 days a year, that's $2,500 that you're going to be spending on lunch.
Yeah.
At minimum. That's a lot of money for lunch when you could be buying a loaf of bread and some cold cuts and a few pieces of fruit and spending $500 a year instead of $25.
Yeah. And John, to your point to budget, you'll be surprised how many people doesn't even have a budget, doesn't even understand where the money's going. And I think if you write it down, you have that visual, you then can make certain decisions that will help you figure out where you need to cut back. Because to your point is that there are sacrifices you need to make in your 20s and 30s so that you can retire well. Because nowadays there are folks that still have to be in the workforce until the age of 70 because they can't afford to retire. So for our viewers who are in their 20s and 30s, make the sacrifice now. Make the sacrifice now so that you can retire well. And there's always going to be some kind of sacrifices, right? Whether you do it now or later. Somehow it's going to equalize itself. So if you're outliving your paycheck, if you are spending more than your paycheck, well, you're going to probably have to work longer and defer that retirement to much, much later.
Exactly. If you can defer your consumption, and that's what saving is deferred consumption. If you can put off that consumption now, and you can invest your money wisely and make more than the rate of inflation, that money is going to be worth a whole lot more to you later, right? So, you know, do you want one nice meal now or two nice meals down the road? Because if you save it and invest it wisely, yeah, it's going to offer you a whole lot nicer lifestyle and possibly even the opportunity for an earlier retirement. You can enjoy even more years.
So John, let's talk a little bit. Earlier, I mentioned the statistic from CIBC, from a polling that they did, that 32% of Canadian between the age of 45 and 64 doesn't have any retirement saving. What is your advice to our viewers who is in their 40s and 50s? How can they start building up a retirement fund?
And that's when most people start, right? 47 seems to be the magic age. That at 47 years old, hopefully the kids have left the house, they're gone, the mortgage has paid down quite a bit, you're more secure in your career, you're earning a bit more money, you've got some extra cash that you can put into savings now. That seems to be the magic age when people really start thinking about it. So the more that you can put away then, even at age 47, you've still got another 18 years until you hit 65. Anything that you can put away then, you should be able to double a couple of times by the time you're ready to retire. So, yeah, start saving. There's a lot of different vehicles available for people to put their savings into now. The tax-free savings account, a lot of people don't take advantage of that. That's where you really want to start putting your money in. Just like the name says, it's all tax-free. So whatever you put in there, you aren't going to be taxed when you withdraw it later on. So unless you're in a top marginal tax bracket, in other words, if you're making less than $120,000, $150,000, you're probably not in that top tax bracket. You're going to be better off utilizing the TFSA. After you've maximized that, start looking at the RSP.
And then also for folks that are in the 20s, there's not a new home one, right? What is that called? The new one that the government just came out with?
Yeah, the first-time home savings account. It's been announced. It's available at a couple of institutions in Canada. Expect a lot more availability of that, probably by June, by the end of June. The government kind of dropped it on top of the industry and didn't give us time to develop the software in the back end for it. And even some of the forms haven't come out from the government, such as how do we access the funds in order to buy a house with it. But yes, everybody that hasn't bought a house can put up to $8,000 a year into a maximum of $40,000. When you put the money in, you do get a deduction on your income tax return for the amount that you put in. And then you can take the money out to buy your first house. If you don't, you can always move that money over into your RSP. It does not affect your RSP contribution. It's a great little vehicle for anybody that doesn't own a house, whether you're planning on buying one or not. I would urge people to contribute if they have the funds available. And that's one of the problems. A lot of people don't have an extra $8,000 kicking around to say, hey, yeah, I'll put it over there. But if you do have money in a TFSA already, it may be worthwhile taking the money from the TFSA and moving it over into that home buyer's account just to get the extra tax deduction.
And I think a good benefit there's two parts of it. Not only you get a tax credit, it's also tax-free. From my understanding that if you borrow from it, you don't have to pay it back.
That's correct. It's not like the RSP, first-time home buyers, that had to be paid back over a period of time. It does not have to be repaid. That's correct. So,
which is a great vehicle for folks who are thinking about buying a home. That is a good way of putting money aside and be able to still have the benefit of both the TFSA and the RSP and not having to kind of pay it back. And I want to kind of go back to the folks that are, just to your point, it says 47 years old is when they're starting to put, to save money for their retirement. Is there like any specific type of portfolio, things they should invest in so that with compounded interest, they can double and triple that money? Just to give some suggestions here to our viewers.
it's dependent on two things. One, it's dependent on the individual's tolerance for risk. How are you going to feel if you're invested in the stock market and your investment were to fall by 10%, 20%, 40%? Are you going to panic and say, whoa, I can't handle that, I'm not sleeping at night, get me out? Which results in people buying high and selling low. That's not the way we want to do it. We want to do it the other way. So you need to have the tolerance for it. You need to be able to sleep at night. One of my mentors, when I started in the industry, was named Bob Seal. And Bob would say, our first job is not to make people money. Our first job is to make sure that our clients are sleeping at night. That's really important. If people aren't sleeping at night, they're in the wrong investments. So that's number one. The second constraint that we have to be aware of is brought on by an individual's situation and age and circumstance. Do they have the capacity, the risk capacity for a riskier investment? So if you're going to need that money within a couple of years, as much as you may be willing to say, yeah, I want to invest it all in the latest cryptocurrency or whatever, risky investment, you don't have the capacity for it. You can't afford to lose when you've got a very short time horizon. If you're investing for longer periods, it's easier to handle the ups and downs. And you know that it's there for longer term. And so you can set it and forget it. It'll come back. There will be waves, right? My general rule of thumb says 1 out of 4 are going to go down. Whether it's 1 out of 4 years, 1 out of 4 months, 1 out of 4 weeks, 1 out of 4 will see the stock market come down. So you may not want to take that chance if you know you're going to need the money in the short term. So based on those two constraints, if you're young and you've got 40 years until you retire and you know you're not going to touch it, absolutely, you can take on riskier investments. The younger person also has, somewhere in the back of their mind, it's not a conscious thing, but when they think about their net worth as a younger person, you include all of your future earnings. So all of that money that you're going to make during the next 40 years that you're working somehow calculates into your own perception of your net worth. And so, hey, I'm going to make $1 million or $2 million or whatever over my career. I can afford to take my life savings of $10,000 and gamble it on a risky investment because you've got that future earnings power. As you get older, you don't have that luxury anymore. And I argue the riskiest time to be invested in the markets are those 4 or 5 years before you're ready to retire. You really need to look at de-risking your investments as you get closer and closer. Because when you retire, the amount that you've got to draw on is going to determine what your annual income is for the rest of your life. You're going to look at that and say, okay, I'm retired now. Here's how much money I have saved. How much can I take out? Right? That's probably the number one question that we get. How much can I take out now? Right? I've saved up my whole life, my working career. I've got this money saved. How much do I get?
So let me answer this question. So folks that are listening to us right now, what is a calculation of how much savings you need to have? I know it's always based on lifestyle, depending on the lifestyle, how many trips you want to take, what kind of car, what do you want to do? What is a rule of thumb? How does someone calculate how much money they need to save or be able to withdraw on an annual basis after their retirement?
So there's a couple of different ways that you can do it. You can work backwards and say, okay, how much money do I need? How much money do I want when I retire? How much income am I going to need? And that's a very difficult question for most people to answer. When your retirement is 20 years off, how do you figure out, well, what's my income needs going to be when I retire? Right? It's kind of nebulous and you can kind of guess at the number, but it's tough to figure out because you don't know what your lifestyle is going to look like. There are, again, some rules of thumb that might say, well, maybe it's 3/4 of your salary because you aren't going to have as many expenses if you're not working anymore. You're not going to spend as much on clothing. You're not going to be commuting. You're going to have some savings. by not working, so your income levels can be a little bit lower. Fact is, people have this uncanny ability to live in retirement on whatever income is available to them. We're actually really good at that, at cutting back if we know that we have to. So I think that for most people, it's okay, here's what I've saved up. What's my income going to be now? And general rule of thumb is somewhere around 4% of what you have saved can be safely withdrawn. There are some who would argue that number should be 3.5% now in a lower interest rate, lower inflation environment. There are some who might argue you can take out a bit more, as much as 5 or 6%, but 4% is kind of the generally accepted number. So if I've got $1 million saved up at the time that I retire, that means I can take out $40,000 a year, which isn't a lot, right? Like you would think, oh, $1 million, that's a lot. No, it means you get 40,000 a year. That's
Yeah. So 40,000 here, quick math, is how many years? 20 years after retirement?
No, so that 40,000 a year should last as long as you live, right? It's called a maximum safe withdrawal rate. So if you don't want to have to worry about running out of money, take your maximum safe withdrawal rate, whether it's talk to your financial advisor. Based on your portfolio, they'll make a recommendation whether it's going to be 3%, 4%, 5%, 6%. And the objective is to never run out of money. That it'll always be there. If we knew the date that we were going to die, we could plan it a whole lot better and make sure that if the bank account ends at zero on the same day that we die, but we don't know that. So we need to make allowances that we don't want to run out. So we go with a low number to allow for those fluctuations in the market. And we don't want to have to worry about running out. Now we can adjust that withdrawal by inflation. So you get 40,000 the first year that we retire, and the next year we can bump it by 2 or 3 or 4% or whatever the inflation was that year. So we can adjust it for inflation once we retire. But that's your safe withdrawal rate if you never want to have to worry about it running out. When you think about these things, you want to think about longevity. How long are you going to live? If you don't have longevity in your genes, then you may be able to accelerate that spending rate. But if you've got grandparents that live to be 100 plus, then you may want to plan to.
Yeah, you have to save quite a bit if you have longevity in your family, in your genes, the 90s to 100. One other thing to also consider for the viewers is if you intend to continue living in your home, because sometimes there's a lot of equity in your house, but if you don't intend to sell it, then you don't have that money to spend. But if you do intend to downsize, then you still have additional equity money that you can put towards your retirement. So things to kind of consider. John, let me ask you this question. What is your top 3 advice for our viewers so that they can have that peace of mind at night, knowing that they can retire well? What are the top 3 things they should be doing?
As we said, start saving early. Start putting your money away where you can. Just get it out of your pocket so you don't think about it anymore. Earlier you can start, the better. Number 2, educate yourself. There's lots and lots of sources of information available online. Go out and Google these things and learn these things yourself. Finally, if you don't have one, do find a financial advisor, a professional that can help you with this. Only 6% of Canadians have a comprehensive plan. That's an extremely small number. But a financial advisor, professional, can help you to manage your investments better, to help you avoid making emotional decisions when it comes to your money and your investing. It really can be more expensive not hiring a financial advisor than hiring one.
That's so true because people doesn't realize that having your financial in order will provide you with the peace of mind. And that's whole part of the whole healthy lives and healthy minds. Because I talk about that a lot with some folks, and I realize that a lot of folks are in debt nowadays, especially with high inflation and high interest. You need to get that under control because that will provide you peace of mind. And to what you said earlier, John, you got to work from a budget and you have to work within your means. Live within your means because at the end of the day, that's what's going to provide you that peace of mind. John, I want to say thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it. And it's interesting you say that there's only 3% of people that have a financial planner. Please look for somebody that you want to work with to be able to help you plan based on the lifestyle that you want to have and the current asset to be able to meet your objectives. So it doesn't matter how old you are, you can always get a financial planner that will assist you in making sure that you will have a good, healthy retirement. John, appreciate all your input and feedback. We'll share your information for those folks that wants to share to use your services. So we'll put your website, your and any of your social media that they can reach out to you for any questions, any information. And on that note, I want to say thank you to all my viewers for joining us today. I look forward to sharing more information in regards to health and wellness. And on that note, I just want to say stay positive and start believing.